Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to you for this penultimate session of our research methodology workshop. Our speakers today are Dr. Atul Mule and Dr. Swapnil Hiremat, and we're going to discuss with you the second part of their systematic review and meta-analysis. So without wasting any time, I request Atul and Swapnil to take this further. Atul, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajapur sir. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning, Swapnil. So today we come to the second session. Today my job is actually even more easy. I'm going to speak only about for about 20 minutes or so, followed by more detailed talk by Dr. Swapnil Hiremat. It will last maybe 70 to 80 minutes, and it will leave about 20 to 30 minutes for discussions and questions. So we'll take questions at the end. So just to recap the last session. So we looked at in the last session we looked at what is a systematic review and what is a meta-analysis. How does a systematic review differ from a narrative review? And we said that systematic review is a process which is more transparent. All the parameters are specified a priori, and the other thing about systematic review is that it is more likely to be unbiased. When we looked at advantages and limitations, um, we looked at how to develop protocol and SQL statement because everything needs to be specified ahead of time, like priori. Then we looked at outcomes of interest, search strategy, study selection, data abstraction, and assessment of data study quality. So we also saw why it is important to look at risk of bias because if there are multiple studies with lots of risk of bias,
Uh,
then
At-
even if we
Atul,
average,
Atul, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would there are people who say that
yeah,
your volume is little low? Can you come closer to your mic or slightly increase your volume? Thank you. Sorry again for disturbing.
um, all right, I'll probably just check my volume setting. Okay, I'll try and talk a little louder. Is that okay now?
This is okay. Okay now.
All right. So then we decided, or then we spoke about why assessment of risk of bias is very important because ultimately we are going to average out multiple studies to come to a summary treatment effect. And if there is a lot of systematic error or bias, then even if you average out multiple studies, the summary effect or the summary estimate is also going to be biased. And then we just sort of introduce the concept of weighted average because ultimately meta-analysis will be a weighted average of multiple study treatment effects. Then we saw the sources of systematic review. We have to formulate a review question, define the implementation criteria properly. Most important part of a systematic review is identifying and locating the studies. So we must have an appropriate search strategy, and we must have a study strategy which is highly sensitive so that we don't miss out on any of the studies that have been conducted and that would otherwise be eligible to included in our review. And then we saw data extraction and assessment of the study quality. So today we'll be seeing analysis and presentation of results, either with or without meta-analysis, and how to interpret them. So today in the second session, what we're going to see is all this, and most of this is actually will be dealt by Dr. Swapnil Hiremat. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about heterogeneity, how to identify heterogeneity, and how to address heterogeneity. How to address heterogeneity. So what exactly is heterogeneity? we often say that in democracy, so everyone is equal, but some are more equal.
As I was saying, every study is unique and every study is different, but the challenge is to identify how different they are or how unequal they are. So what are the sources of differences in the studies or in the results of the studies? So the first category of the source of diversity is the clinical diversity, which is also called as clinical heterogeneity. So it arises from differences in the participants, the way the eligibility criteria are designed, the way the interventions are applied. For example, you may have multiple drugs, so multiple beta blockers or multiple ACE inhibitors, and they may not be exactly the same. Beta blockers can have intrinsic symptomatic activities, some don't have, and sometimes the treatment effect may differ because of that. Then we have differences in control groups, whether they are treated differently or not, the way the outcomes are assessed, who is going to measure those outcomes, and which outcomes are actually projected. All those can be different in different studies. The second major source of diversity is something what we can call is methodological diversity, also called as methodological heterogeneity. Obviously, if you are trying to combine different types of study design, then there will be a big amount of diversity. So typically, if you are trying to combine cohort studies with a randomized controlled trial, then that itself will bring a lot of diversity and heterogeneity. But even if you are looking at even a single type of study design, like an RCT, even in an RCT, you can have different study designs which will introduce different risks of bias. For example, certain studies could be blinded and certain would be unblinded, and therefore that may impact on your results. Concealment of allocation could be different, and that may also introduce different risks of bias in different studies, and that will also potentially introduce more heterogeneity in the different studies. And lastly, what we can call it as a statistical heterogeneity. So that basically means statistical tests that we can do, and that will identify that the differences between the treatment effects of different studies are actually not just because of a random error, but they are because of some systematic error. Scope of a systematic review will also determine the extent of heterogeneity. So, for example, different studies are obviously often, this is a very commonly cited example, apples and oranges, and we're trying to combine apples and oranges. And obviously, some people will frown upon that. But someone may say, hey, I'm just interested only in fruit. So I don't care whether the apples, oranges, or even mangoes. I just want to count my fruit. And that's probably okay. The next thing is how to measure heterogeneity. And this is very simplistic statistical information that I'm going to give right now. There are two major tests of heterogeneity. One is what is called as Q statistics or a chi-square statistics. It basically comes from a square difference between the overall effect and the individual study effect multiplied by the study weight. And it turns out that this difference follows a chi-square distribution with k minus 1 degrees of freedom. That is number of studies minus 1 degrees of freedom. And the resultant p-value you can use to decide whether the studies are heterogeneous or not. Typically, this test is not very sensitive. So most people would say that p less than 0.1 or even p less than 0.15 may indicate substantial heterogeneity. And then you may have to think about different ways of doing meta-analysis. The I-square statistics is actually partly derived from the Q statistics itself, and it is a more quantitative form, and it's more a graded form that you can analyze and assess. So if your I-square is about 20 to 25% or less, then you can be fairly sure that most studies are homogeneous and there is not much heterogeneity at all. Once the I-square starts going above 30%, then we start wondering about some amount of heterogeneity creeping in. And once the I-square is more than 50%, then we can say that there is substantial heterogeneity, and you should really carefully decide whether you really want to combine the different study estimates or not. So these are a few examples. So if you can see this one, so this is a forest plot showing four fairly homogeneous studies. You can see that a 95% confidence interval is sort of overlapping mostly. And when you see the heterogeneity chi-square, the p-value is 0.89 and I-square is 0. So this is an example of a very homogeneous study population. As against that, when you look at this forest plot, even just by inspecting the forest plot, one can see that there are certain studies which are way different than the other, and the 95% confidence intervals don't overlap exactly. So if you look at this particular study, then the confidence interval of these studies are quite different from the confidence interval of this study. So there probably is a lot of heterogeneity. The studies are not very similar, and that is actually revealed by the chi-square test. Again, the p-value is 0.03, so that is a significant p-value for the Q statistic, which means substantial heterogeneity. I-square is also greater than 50%. So when we have such situation, what do we do? More detailed discussion again will be done by Dr. Swapnil, but I'm just going to introduce you to this concept. First is, of course, check the data. Sometimes there are some silly mistakes in data abstraction or data entry, and that can lead to some vague findings which we need to just recheck, cross-check, and make sure that the numbers that were entered are correct. Secondly, don't do meta-analysis. It is not essential part of a systematic review. If you think that there is a lot of heterogeneity and the studies are way different than each other, then combining them and giving a summary estimate may not actually be very helpful. Just to give an example again, recently, a few days back, there was a sero survey conducted in the city next to us, and the summary estimate of sero prevalence was about 32%. So you can see that 32% of all population of the city is positive for coronavirus. But if you look carefully, there are areas where the positivity rate was around 70-75%, and then there are areas where the positivity rate was only 4%. So what would give you a clearer or better picture from a policy perspective? Saying that 30% of all population is positive, or saying that this particular area has 4% positivity rate and this particular area has got 70% positivity rate. So sometimes keeping it separate and not combining actually gives more meaningful information, which is actually more useful for making decisions or policies. Thirdly, and even more importantly, try and explore the heterogeneity. Why there are differences between the treatment effects in different studies? What are the causes? Are the study population different? Are the treatments different? Are the outcomes being analyzed differently? Are there different biases which are present in the different studies? So you try and understand the heterogeneity. Where is it coming from? We can always ignore heterogeneity and just do a fixed effect model, and that's probably not advisable. So ignoring heterogeneity is definitely not the best way. You can include the heterogeneity into a combined effect by something called as random effects meta-analysis that we are going to discuss shortly. You can try and change the effect measure. Sometimes what happens is that if you're trying to use relative risk, then different studies may look heterogeneous on the relative risk scale. But if you then change the scale or change the outcome into an absolute risk reduction, then the studies might look more homogeneous, and that just follows from the way the relative risk or risk ratios are calculated and the way absolute risk reduction is calculated. So that's something that can be done, and it's an easy thing to do. And the last is to exclude outlier studies. If you got some 10-15 studies, all of them look similar and only one or two look very different than the others, then you can just exclude that one or two outlier study and conduct a meta-analysis. But it still begs the question why those one or two studies were different, and you still probably need to explore the heterogeneity. So I think exploring heterogeneity and finding out reasons, and if at all, then combining them by using random effects meta-analysis would be a better options rather than just ignoring heterogeneity. Now, this is an extreme example of heterogeneity. This is again a made-up example. So you can see these three studies and these two studies are very different. Now you can obviously combine them by any estimation, whether it is fixed effect or random. In this case, they use a random effect meta-analysis, and it is technically correct. But this summary statistics or this summary effect, it neither tells us about these studies, neither tells us about these two studies. So, using this kind of combination is sometimes not desirable. So coming back to apples and oranges, so we can always try and combine them together, and then we may get something like this, and it's something which is not often desirable. So it's a little bit of a hard choice whether to do a meta-analysis or not. That's the real question. And I think I'll now invite Dr. Swapnil Hiremat to talk more about that. How to identify heterogeneity, how to combine results, and what would be the best approach if you find substantial heterogeneity. So today being Halloween, I think Swapnil is going to enjoy Halloween today. And I'm sure he will have lots of treats for us and tell us a few tricks also. So over to Dr. Swapnil Hiremat.